Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qizhi. Coming up in this edition, UN Nuclear Agency Chief Rafael Grossi has warned of a risk of a nuclear accident after visiting the Kursk nuclear power plant in Russia, saying the situation is serious. UN agencies are preparing to launch a polio vaccination campaign in Gaza, where displaced Palestinians have no access to clean water. And in Africa, volunteers in Mali are intensifying their efforts to assist thousands impacted by severe flooding. We begin in Europe. The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency has visited the nuclear power plant in Russia's Kursk region amid the ongoing Ukrainian offensive there. On Tuesday, Rafael Grossi inspected the nuclear plant, saying there is a risk of a nuclear accident due to its proximity to the fighting, and the situation is serious. Grossi also noted that he had allegedly seen the traces of drone attack on the premises of the plant. Russia has accused Ukraine of the attack, which raised the specter of a nuclear catastrophe. Alyosha Milinkovic reports.
According to Russian sources, marks on the asphalt inside the Kursk nuclear power plant are evidence of an explosion caused by an Ukrainian drone. This power station has been in operation for nearly 50 years. It lacks modern concrete containment structures around its reactor, leaving it especially vulnerable to an attack. Plant operator has warned that the repercussions of such an event could be catastrophic.
The
attack on the Kursk nuclear station might be an attack on all of the nuclear energy industry of the entire planet and could bring irreparable damage to the development of the nuclear power stations across the world. The results of specific attacks were presented, and there is no ambiguity about who carried out these strikes and where those came from.
During his visit, the head of the UN Nuclear Agency, Rafael Grossi, confirmed he saw evidence of a drone strike without naming who was responsible. He conducted a tour of the nuclear power plant and held closed-door discussions with its management and Russian authorities. Following this fact-finding mission, Grossi addressed several dozen journalists in the town center, expressing his concerns.
We care for nuclear safety and security wherever that happens. So my message in Kursk Oblast, in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, in Sochi, in Kiev, in Buenos Aires, in New York is the same. No nuclear accident. This cannot happen, and this is why the IAEA will always be there.
Grossi plans to deliver this message in Kiev, where he has plans to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky next week. The situation at the Russian Kursk and Ukrainian Zaporozhye nuclear power stations will be on the table of that meeting.
Rafael Grossi's visit to the Kursk nuclear power plant has concluded. At the end, he admitted that the only thing he can do is appeal to all sides to show restraint around the nuclear facilities. According to Grossi, other than that, there is hardly anything that the IAEA can do.
That was Alyosha Milinkovic on growing concerns over nuclear safety amid Ukraine's offensive in Russia's Kursk region. Turning to the Middle East, UN agencies are preparing to launch a polio vaccination campaign in Gaza. UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric says vaccination is the most effective way to protect children from the polio virus. Polio is highly contagious, primarily spreading through contact with contaminated feces, water or food. It can lead to breathing difficulties and irreversible paralysis, usually in the legs, and poses a particular risk to young children. The threat of polio is rising fast in the Gaza Strip, prompting aid groups to call for an urgent ceasefire to increase vaccination efforts and prevent a major outbreak. The UN aims to deliver 1.6 million doses of the polio vaccine to Gaza, where displaced Palestinians are living in crowded tent camps with inadequate access to clean water and proper waste disposal. Jody Jacobs reports from the United Nations.
The World Health Organization warns that it's just a matter of time before polio reaches thousands of Palestinian children. It's a race against time. More than 500,000 children must get vaccinated amidst an ongoing war.
Right now, there is no safe place for children in Gaza. And without polio balls, without the guns going silent, as we've been saying for a couple of weeks now, it's not possible to implement this campaign. So we're hoping that our ask that our call will be answered and that we'll be able to safely proceed with the campaign on the ground.
More than 1.2 million oral polio vaccines have now arrived in the Gaza Strip, with more expected in the coming days, but the operation will be a challenging one. The WHO and UNICEF say that their most crucial responsibility is protecting the so-called cold chain. The vaccines need to be kept at temperature ranges of between 2 to 8 degrees Celsius or they will spoil. This requires ice boxes, mobile fridges, working generators and fuel.
UNICEF is pushing for this vaccination campaign to roll out as soon as possible with our partners WHO and UNRWA. However, we're not doing this alone, and indeed we need some guarantees and some buy-in from both parties to the conflict that this can be done safely. And I'm confident that we will achieve that, because this threat goes way beyond the borders that are currently being disputed.
Humanitarians continue their calls for a pause in fighting to allow for this mass polio vaccination campaign. On Monday, a senior UN official said that it had been forced to temporarily halt some of its humanitarian operations, saying the security situation has become extremely dangerous for the UN to operate. Israel has indicated that the vaccination campaign would be conducted in coordination with the Israeli military as part of routine humanitarian pauses that it observes. More than 11 medical centers will be used for this operation, according to the UN, and more than 1,000 volunteers are being trained. The distribution of these life-saving polio vaccines is expected to begin by this weekend.
That was Jody Jacobs in New York. In Africa, emergency responders in Sudan have been scrambling to find several hundred people who are missing after the collapse of a major dam in the country's northeast. Raging waters from heavy rains breached the Aba Dam on Sunday. The war-torn country has experienced an intense rainy season since last month. Naba Muhuddin reports.
Surging waters burst through a crucial dam here, washing away 20 villages. People are still missing as rescue and relief efforts are hindered by destroyed roads.
I am here in Arbaat region. The collapsed dam lies right behind this mountain. All of the roads leading to dam have been totally collapsed because of the water flow, which still poses grave risk to villages and locals who live nearby.
Floodwater also damaged and destroyed farms and killed livestock.
We lost everything and we could barely rescue our families. The water washed away our farms, vehicles, livestock and crops. It's the worst water flows I've seen in my life. We need the government to rescue people who are still stuck behind the mountain. We need them to dig wells so we can have clean water at least.
According to meteorological experts, Sudan's climate has completely changed. The northern and Red Sea states, in particular, are witnessing the heaviest torrential rains in 100 years.
I never saw such amount of water in my life. We were lucky that we were awake and we could escape with our children. We need the government to fix the roads and rescue other villages. We want them to increase efforts and find alternative water sources for us and for millions of people.
The dam was built to collect and store rainwater during the rainy season to ensure the availability of water throughout the year. Now, its destruction could cause acute water shortages across the region.
That was Naba Muhuddin. Also in Africa, volunteers in Mali are boosting efforts to aid thousands affected by flooding. Authorities have declared a state of national disaster after floods killed 30 people and affected over 47,000 others. Lomardo Tapley reports from Bamako.
The torrential rains have overwhelmed the city, plunging it into total chaos. Residents have been forced to evacuate their inundated home, leaving behind their possession. Key infrastructure such as road and bridge have been severely damaged, hampering road traffic.
The water has entered our house and destroyed all our cereals. My children and I have been drawing water until midnight. It destroyed all our stock of millet and rice before help arrived because all the men were at work. It was just us women at home.
I have been here since February 2014. Since then, it's the first time it has happened to us. Usually it's limited to the baffles. To be honest, the rain destroyed all our cereal stocks, our furniture and everything else. So far, we still have our mattresses outside. The water has risen to 80 millimeters. Thank God there have been no injuries. We immediately took the children upstairs.
Despite the immense challenges, Bamako is showing remarkable resilience in overcoming the difficulties. The current efforts to address the flooding and prevent future disaster are promising. Many NGOs and volunteers have stepped up, offering donation and resources to help those affected recover and rebuild.
Today we came to clean up the watercourse because we saw that a lot of houses had flooded after the rain, and our coordinator asked us to do something about it. The aim is to be able to clean up the watercourse in conjunction with the local residents, of course, to avoid any further inconvenience.
Following the government's declarations of a natural disaster in response to the devastating floods, several significant measures undertaken include rescue operation, temporary shelters, damage assessment, infrastructure rehabilitation, and future prevention efforts.
That was Mamadou Tabli reporting in Mali. Finally, in Asia, Typhoon Shanshan is bearing down on southern Japan. Authorities have told residents on the Amami Islands to be alert for destructive winds and flooding. Forecasters say maximum gusts could reach over 250 kilometers per hour, strong enough to topple houses. Chris Gilbert reports from Tokyo.
Well, back on Monday, authorities on the island of Amami, which is located about halfway between Okinawa and Japan's main western island of Kyushu, advised about 42,000 people that they were going to evacuate them on Tuesday, which is what has happened. And the storm is moving very slowly with extremely high winds, as you mentioned, torrential wet rain, storm surges, high waves, and that means that poor old Amami has been battered for the last couple of days. But Kyushu is next in the path with the major cities of Kumamoto, Nagasaki, Fukuoka. This is an area that has already experienced rain for the majority of the summer ever since rainy season began in June.
That was Chris Gilbert in Tokyo. Now recapping the headlines. UN Nuclear Agency Chief Rafael Grossi has warned of a risk of a nuclear accident after visiting the Kursk nuclear plant in Russia, saying the situation is serious. UN agencies are preparing to launch a polio vaccination campaign in Gaza, where displaced Palestinians have no access to clean water. And in Africa, volunteers in Mali are intensifying their efforts to assist thousands of people impacted by severe flooding. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We would welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thank you for listening.